Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jess.
And I'm Sav. Welcome to Anna Diet Soda, episode 26, all things performance and longevity. Hi, it's Sav and Jess. Welcome to And a Diet Soda, an opportunity for people to celebrate their successes, share their failures, and hopefully give a little advice on all things relatable along the way.
This community is for appreciating the little things and fostering positive mindsets and intuitive thoughts by talking to people, because chances are they've been through it too.
So today's topic will be all about how to extend the length and wellness of your life. Jess and I are really excited to have such an in-depth conversation about longevity today.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Today's guest is Dr. Kien Vuu, known as the Performance and Longevity Doctor and author of the book Thrive States. You guys should definitely check that out. We are going to dive into some topics that actually many may not even consider when thinking about reaching their optimal physical and mental health. So this is going to be a really interesting episode. Thank you so much, Dr. Vuu, for being here with us today.
Well, it is great to be with you guys. You guys have great energy, which is also a very key component to longevity and wellness. So thank you for your energy. And I am really excited to talk with your audience today.
We are too. We're super excited. I love this topic. So we're just going to dive right in. To start, we wanted to know if you could just talk a little bit about your personal journey. I know that we spoke a little bit about your life as a refugee and kind of just what led you into medicine. I know that you also said that you had been diagnosed with a disease throughout that journey. So we just want to share it all with the listeners.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's just start there. Well, I was a refugee. I was actually born in Vietnam a couple of years after the Vietnam War. And what had happened was when America left, the communists kind of took over Vietnam. We were living in the South, and my parents, who was pregnant with me, my mom who was pregnant with me, knew that there was probably not going to be a future for me there. They basically took over all the businesses, took over all the currency. And when I was just, in my mother's womb, my parents were like, we need to go, we need to leave here because there really is no future for our child here. And we basically escaped by boat. So when I was only a few months old, I was on a refugee boat with over 2,000 refugees, became the only infant to have survived. I was on that boat for 8 months, docked outside the Philippine refugee camp. I spent another 3 months in the refugee camp. And then, after that, we were sponsored to America by a Catholic church. And I grew up basically in Chinatown, Los Angeles, which was a really poor immigrant neighborhood. But I was fortunate. I got bused to a more affluent area for school, but not so fortunate. When I was there, I was probably one of the only few Asian kids that were in school. So I was constantly being teased for being poor, for the holes in my hand-me-down clothes, for the stinky food my parents sent me to the school with. I was being called chink. And all those experiences actually left a huge mark on me growing up. I mean, I constantly felt like I was not enough. I didn't like the skin I was born into. I constantly remember wanting to be richer, wanting to be taller, wanting to be more American, not liking who I was as a person. And I didn't know that at that point, but that desire to be someone else, that not being able to fully be who you are, that actually led me to the disease I was, had later on. I actually wanted to be an actor or somebody, who was in front of the camera or something like that when I was a kid. But there was actually no Asians. There's more now, but there's probably no Asian heroes that were on the screen. I mean, I had to choose from being a Jackie Chan who didn't speak good English and knew martial arts, which I was not. And so that's why I sort of went into medicine. My mom actually gave me 3 choices. She was like, Kien, we sacrificed our entire life for us to be in America. You could be a doctor, an MD, or physician. So I went to medical school. And one of the things that I constantly did was, because I didn't have that feeling like I was enough or liked who I was on the inside, I was constantly wanting to build this mask and this life, or these external things outside of me, to make me feel better about myself. So, I strove to be class valedictorian. I was always striving. And I became a doctor, and I did the same as a doctor. I mean, yes, I became a doctor to help people, but I also became a doctor because I wanted to be respected. I used this white coat to go, hey, I'm Dr. Vuu. And, throughout my career, that's what I was trying to excel at. I was trying to excel at the hospital, be the best doctor I could be, see as many patients as I could see. And I didn't know this, but going through medical school, I didn't I wasn't given the tools. I was given the tools as to how to help people when they got really acutely sick, like stop a bleed and do things like that. But I didn't learn how to be healthy and well myself. And 5 years ago, me being a medical doctor that treated, late stage chronic disease, I got disease. I was overweight. I was diabetic. I got high blood pressure and I was on prescription meds. And it wasn't until I started to stop and I really needed to do a deep dive into my own life. And I started to really study what true wellness is, what true performance is, that I was able to reverse all those conditions in 6 months. And that's why I do what I do now.
Wow. So you took like the ultimate imposter syndrome and just used it to like shape your life in the best way possible.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't even know if it's imposter syndrome or just the fact that you took what most people would feel like instantly just like discourage them, and you became your own role model. You became the person that you were missing in your life to look up to, with who looked like you, who had a background like you, and you became that person. And that's so incredible for your kids now, for so many people that have followed you. So major kudos to you. I know you're like, whatever, man.
No,
Like,
I think that's actually the hero's journey of every human being that's there. I think we were all born with greatness. We are all born enough. We are all born knowing the things that will light us up, that will bring joy and happiness and health in our life. But as we grow up, we have parents, we've got TV, we've got media, we got all these things telling us maybe you shouldn't be that way. Maybe you should be something else. And then we grow and we build these masks. But I think it's the human story of us to finally rediscover, recognizing that the mask and the program are not us, and that we get to choose, and we innately know who we are. And if we start to feel like something's off, because our body might be telling us, our mental states might be telling us something's off, we can use that. We can use that not as, oh my God, I've got this disease right now, but it's your own body's way of telling you something's not right. I can realign myself. And I do see so many people, doctors, lawyers, actors, people kind of waking up to who they really are and living the life that they were really meant to live.
yeah, that's amazing. I love that you relate it back to medicine too, because it's such a mental game for so much of it, but you just like throw in those little analogies, metaphors to chronic disease, which is so great too. So what exactly, in your words, is longevity, and why is it so important to reach this thrive state, as we're talking about in your book? And also on that note, can you define what a thrive state is, and why it allows people to reach that optimal wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now I get to work with many clients in the Los Angeles and Hollywood area. A lot of them being actors, CEOs. People come to me because they want more energy. They want better mental capacity. They want a better sex life. They want to live longer. They want to be more. They want to be able to create more and have more. And so they come to me because they want to reach a next version of themselves. But what is that in terms of, and what biologically gives us optimal mental, physical, emotional, sexual performance? It all comes down to our individual cells. If we have optimal cells, we will have optimal performance, right? So the very small unit of our body is a cell. A cell, works together. They form tissues. Tissues work together to form organs. Organs work together in organ systems. And then they basically make up who we are, our immune system, our cardiovascular system, all these things. So if we want an optimal immune system, if we want an optimal mental system, optimal each one of these musculoskeletal systems, we need our cells to be optimal. So now some people think, all right, well, what determines the fate of our cells? What determines whether or not our cells are actually optimal or they're suboptimal? Some people think it's actually our DNA. We actually get a strand from mom, a strand from dad, and that's only partly the story. See, the DNA is kind of like the playbook of basically everything a cell does, right? But just like you're playing a game on the playbook, you're not playing all the plays at once. You got to play the right particular play, at the right time in order for you to win the game. And in order to win the game of longevity and performance and to have optimal cellular health, the genes need to be played at a very, defined time as well. So not all the genes are turned on or turned off at a particular time. There's actually something that controls how these genes behave. So the question is, what controls that gene? Well, it turns out our DNA is constantly listening to all the energies that are around it and constantly interacting with the energy. And the energy comes in from nutrition, comes in from our thoughts, comes in from the air that we breathe, the light that we see. It comes in from the emotions that we feel. All speaks to our DNA. So what is the thrive state? The thrive state is that optimal energetic environment that speaks to our DNA, so that our DNA goes, wow, we are in an awesome place, and I'm going to give you optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Now, if you don't give your DNA the right cues, your DNA is actually going to think that you're in danger. When your DNA thinks you're in danger, all the energy that is supposed to be for growth and for healing is actually, reserved. And the cells are going to think it's in a stress state. You're going to an increase in inflammation. You get a decrease in immunity. That's what puts us to get chronic symptoms and chronic disease. So really, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance is actually on the opposite side of the coin of chronic disease and chronic symptoms. And what makes the difference between the two is being in that optimal state, having the optimal collective energy that we give to our DNA so that it knows to give you optimal health, longevity, and peak performance.
Oh my gosh, great. Fantastic. I am like mesmerized by that definition right there. So I can like think to moments in my life where I feel like is my personal definition of like where I'm thriving, my optimal state. But I also feel like that can be really exhausting. So I don't know if I have an incorrect definition in my brain of like what that thrive state is, because is there a difference with what you're talking about between feeling great, you're aware, you're being productive, maybe you're working out, eating healthy, and then at the end of the day, how can you remain in a thrive state, but allow yourself to recover and recuperate from those long days? Because it can't just be this constant state of like uppers, right?
Yeah, great question. Well, I mean, the thrive state is actually just the biochemical and biological, collective of everything that we're doing, in our everyday life. And, I boil it down. Basically, every single energy, our DNA is constantly listening to everything, and it'll interact with everything. But to memorize an infinite amount of things that will affect our DNA is going to make anybody crazy. It turns out that the 80-20 rule of controlling our DNA rests in 7 key areas. And if you focus on these 7 key areas and you make sure you're optimized in each, that will control the optimal state of our cells. And what are those 7 areas? Those are sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, our thought and mindsets, relationships, and a sense of purpose. Now, those 7 things actually speak to our DNA. And, right now we actually have tons of science that back up, these are the things our cell needs that are constantly listening. Our DNA is constantly listening to those things that will put us into, its best healthy state.
Wow. So I'm really, thank you for sharing the 7 reasons. We were going to ask a little bit about that from the book as well, but obviously a lot of our listeners tune in to hear about nutrition. So we want to touch on that a little bit more directly and specifically. We know that there's a correlation between physical health and nutrition, but also mental health. And I love how you always speak to that sense of purpose, especially when it comes to mental health and how it affects our minds and then therefore our bodies. But what are some ways that people can optimize their health and increase the duration of their life or longevity through nutrition? What types of food does that entail, and how can they change their mindset around nutrition? Okay, well, great question. A lot to unpack there. First thing I'm going to say is there is no one universal, diet that's going to work for everybody. There's a lot of ideologies that are out there. There are basically diet wars, vegans and carnivore eaters and paleo and keto. Which one is going to work? Well, you have to listen to your body and you have to be a little bit intuitive, but there are some general rules that I abide by that I think most diets actually, the things that work about these diets are because they follow these rules. And what are they? They are cut out the sugar and the processed foods. All those things are very inflammatory. They'll actually make your body think that it is, in the stress state constantly. So take out sugars, take out processed food. Eat
whole foods that are real. So minimally processed vegetables, if you do eat meats, try to have a very clean source. Industrial meat is very different than grass-fed, grass-finished meat. Industrial meat, that's when they get, livestock, chicken and cows, they'll put them all into these terrible factories, makes them very crowded. They inject them with antibiotics, they inject them with hormones, they feed them stuff that they're not supposed to be eating. If you eat that kind of meat, that's actually very, very inflammatory. They're bad for the planet, they're bad for the animals, and they're bad for humans as well. And that's very different from, meats that are, conventionally raised, or sorry, are pasture raised, grass-fed and grass-finished meats. So that's going to be eat whole foods. And then I would probably say, if you stick to those things, just getting rid of the sugar and processed food, eating whole foods, you're going to make a lot of progress. The other thing that I do that I recommend for people is to try out some times when you don't eat, which is like intermittent fasting or time restricted eating. We remember what our bodies were like, back in the caveman days. There were some days that there was no food around, and then so they had to starve for a little bit, and then they killed an animal, and then they were able to feast. So back in the day, our body had something called metabolic flexibility, meaning they were able to create energy from fat when there was no food. And then when there was food and they happened to eat, some stuff with sugar, they could also use energy from glucose or sugar. We had that flexibility. These days, when people are eating all the time, they actually lose that metabolic flexibility a little bit. And to get that back, well, it's just alternate every now and then, some times where you don't eat versus times you do eat. Incorporating intermittent fasting or time restricted eating into your regimen is going to help you a lot.
Okay, so yes, I've definitely heard about intermittent fasting. I feel like that was almost the latest kind of like diet craze that everyone recently went to. So I want to give you a second to elaborate on that. And I think that Sav has a question about that as well. But I also wanted to circle back and just clarify about the agricultural industry and the beef industry as a whole. There will never be any sort of antibiotics or hormones in your meat that you get processed or that you pick up at the grocery store. There's a washout period for beef cattle. If there's a cow that is sick, they will get antibiotics if that's the farm's protocol, but there will be a washout period before they get processed. So you will never have meat that has antibiotics in the store. So I just wanted to clarify, just the ag person in me, that the beef industry gets a lot of crap, but I don't think that, at least in my opinion, it's that source of an issue. It's that people need to be educated on how to introduce more whole foods, like you were saying, into your diet, like vegetables, alongside of those choices that they're making with steak or chicken or whatever they're eating as well. Yeah,
I would probably say, the longevity studies demonstrate that, a calorie restricted diet actually, is helpful for longevity and may potentially not having too much protein. But I would probably say if it comes from a good source, and how I eat is, what I recommend for people to eat. I eat probably 50 to 75% organic vegetables on all my plate. I got a good sustainable source of protein, and it's typically just a palm size. And I call it as a condom meat because it's not like the main thing. I just have a little bit. And then just the combination of those two things are great. I mean, I was a diabetic a couple of years ago, so I kind of lay off of grains. And I know a lot of people actually have problem with grains anyway, whether or not they're diabetic or not, because some people kind of react to the grains that are in, are actually reacting to the grains, and they're giving them upset stomach, something called leaky gut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I just recently learned about that. I learned about all these things like leaky gut and what was the one you were telling? Oh, SIBO. Sav was telling me about that. But yeah, what were you going to say, Sav?
No, I just had a question bouncing off of the intermittent fasting. So my master's thesis was actually on intermittent fasting for postmenopausal women, and we saw so many benefits to that. But as far as like an average person, or maybe somebody who is struggling with a different chronic disease or illness like diabetes, what would you recommend as like a healthy amount of time to fast? Because some people it can be a way to like starve yourself if they aren't really educated on that topic. I mean, how long would you recommend the overnight fast be, or maybe even the fast in between meals, that like postprandial stage of eating?
Okay, well, great question. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And what I would recommend is if you do start it, start off slow and don't try to, do like a 3-day fast or something right away. I mean, I would do that, but I will only do that probably once a month or once every couple of months. So start off slow, get your body used to it, because this is something, a lot of people will say, oh, okay, this is a fad, but intermittent fasting or fasting is something that our ancestors have done all the time. So it is actually a fad that people have actually included 3 meals a day, having to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's actually in our more recent history than the fasting is. So I would say that that's actually the more natural way, the way that our bodies were designed to eat. And then we created a lot of stuff from agriculture, a lot of food abundance that people started to eat various times during the day. But if you were to start with a fast, I would probably say, first, just start to maybe slow down, decrease the window, right? So, many people, if you're eating 3 meals a day, maybe start off just having a fasting window of 12 hours. So if you get up and you want to have breakfast, at 8 or 9, great. Then stop eating at 8 or 9. Then you decrease that window. So you can go from 12 hours of fasting to 16 hours of fasting, which is probably something that most people could tolerate, is 16 hours. Now, some people, once you get to the point where you start to fast and there's long periods where you don't eat, that's when your body is going to turn to your own fat stores for fuel. And when your body is acclimated to do that, you'll start to notice, oh, okay, when you're fasting, you actually have more energy. You're actually, mentally more clear than if you're eating. You start to feel really good. And then there are some people, once they get to that stage where they're like, okay, did I eat because I was just used to eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or was I actually hungry? Because as you start to fast, you'll start to recognize, oh, okay, am I really hungry at this point, or am I not? And then if you're not feeling hungry, some people skip it altogether. And then that's when you can maybe start to include 1 meal a day or fasting for 24 hours or a little bit more. But, I don't think, Sav, there is a recommended or an ideal way of doing it. I would just say start slow, listen to your body as you're doing.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was jotting down a couple questions that I had while you were talking. This is just such an interesting topic. I also just learned in the last 6 months probably that, because of my roommate, she loves to work out at night. She used to be a total evening workout person, and she was frustrated because she's like, my BMI is weird. She's very tiny person, very fit, and she's like, I'm not gaining muscle, what's happening? And so she talked to a nutritionist, and he was saying that you have to eat after you work out, which makes total sense. So with this intermittent fasting, how does that work for people, depending on what time of the day they work out and how they need to fuel their bodies so that they don't break down protein or muscles, they break down that fat?
Yeah, great question. I would probably say the following. One, I recognize that due to some people's schedule, workout at night is probably something that they'll need, they'll have to do. I would always say it's always best to work out in the morning, because then you get the endorphins going. Your body's sort of in a revved up state. Think about, you want to rest at night, but you're pushing your body up into the point, and then you ask it 30 minutes later, okay, hey, it's time to sleep. So it's not really great for your circadian rhythms. But if you have to, I would probably say, if it's choosing between not working out and working out at night, go ahead, work out at night. But the optimal is to work out in the morning. Your next question was, do you need to have protein? So is she not gaining muscle, or is she not losing fat?
It was the nutritionist had said that since she wasn't giving her body nutrition after a workout, that she was breaking down muscle instead of breaking down fat. And then since then, when she started eating after workouts, she's seeing a difference in building muscle.
Yeah, certainly. Well, you definitely want to have the nutrients there. And that's another reason why, I favor, working out in the morning, because you can fuel when your body needs that, that time to add, muscle build. You'll be eating after your workout. And if you eat at night, unfortunately, if you want to, you want to, if you want to work out at night and you eat at night, that's not very good. I always recommend you should not eat maybe 3 to 4 hours before you start to go to bed, because you're going to be spending so much energy, trying to digest the food while you're sleeping, when your body really wants that time to rejuvenate and replenish. So eating before you go to bed is not something that I recommend. So, what I would recommend for her to do is to probably try to work out in the morning if possible. And if she were to fast, she can start eating during the time of the day, versus working out at night, then eating at night. Then her hormones are off, then her sleep is off. So wanting to build muscle or lose fat, she's fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, that's true. I'm such a wimp when it comes to waking up early, and I always want to be that person that gets up and gets in a workout before work. But so what you just said might have been the final push to get me to maybe wake up to my 6 a.m. alarm instead of hitting that snooze for an extra half hour. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Okay, so let's transition a little bit to the having access portion of this discussion. We've talked a little bit about this on our intro call. We know that this is a really great way to eat, mostly whole foods, these really good sources of meats if you do eat meat. But for people who don't have access to those things, we're aware that there are a lot of people who don't have access to quality foods. So can you speak a bit on that and how people can focus on bettering their health with the resources that they do have?
Absolutely. So recognize that there's always, there's a continuum of food quality that's there. And certainly the highest quality foods are going to cost more. And unfortunately, that gives access issues. But there are certainly things that you can do to give yourself the best shot. For example, if you were to go to the environmental working group, that is ewg.org, you could see a list of vegetables, which ones are, that are considered most dirty when it comes to pesticides and all the stuff that's in it, when it's not organic. And you'll have a list of those veggies. So if you can't go full organic, just make sure that you're washing things off, with extra diligence to kind of wash off, as many chemicals off the produce as possible. When you're talking about meats, you've got on one end completely grass-fed, grass-finished, maybe coming from a regenerative farm, and then you have different grading too, right? I mean, some gradings will say no antibiotics, no hormones. Some are USDA and of lower quality. So know where you are, in the spectrum of the meat that you're getting, and then in your mind, you're saying, okay, what, I can't afford the higher level meats. Maybe I just won't eat as much, and maybe stick with more veggies, and I'm gonna wash things off really cleanly. So I mean, that's a way of kind of working around that. But I definitely know there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to maybe create a more equitable distribution of good food quality, but it's fighting against big food that makes food very addictive and very cheap for people. But I think we're going to make some progress. So just know that if you can't afford it yet, there's probably some easy ways and some easy cheats to get around that.
Yeah, we always talk when we speak on things like the dirty dozen and stuff. I feel that can be damaging to people if they hear that, because they imagine that feeling of being like, oh, I'm too poor, I don't really deserve these foods. And so that's something that we always speak to. It's like, if you eat the blueberries, if they're $1 cheaper and that fits in your budget, eat those. But as far as washing things off, what do you typically do? Does that just look like water? So for somebody listening, how can you really clean your vegetables and wash those off before you're eating them?
Yeah, so I would probably say water is probably the best bet, and doing it for a couple of minutes, if that's the way you go. I mean, fortunately, I go as organic as possible. I like to do that because I don't mind eating a little bit of soil, because it actually, if it comes from an organic farm, you've got stuff in that soil that's going to be good for your microbiome. So, I mean, if you get to an opportunity where, you're going for the highest quality stuff, you don't have to do as much washing, but water is something that I would probably recommend. And, if it's going to be something like strawberries, spend some extra time if it's not organic, because strawberries, I believe, is like probably the number one thing on that, Dirty Dozens group.
I've also heard of like vinegar, just like using a vinegar, mix a little bit of vinegar diluted in it will really help to clean. So I usually just like hot water and like really soak it, but I've heard there's a couple of other things. So
cool. Awesome. I mean, anything beats the beginning of COVID when I would bring groceries home and let them soak in soapy water for like 20 minutes. But yeah, bye to those days. So what's your like perfect world with accessibility to food and food availability? I'm not even sure if I'm using the right terms for this, but like for people of all socioeconomic statuses, like what's the perfect world that exists?
Oh, wow.
To get these, like in all your dreams, if you had all the money in the world and all the resources, like what would that look like for you?
Well, you're making me dream right now. And
I know, yeah, dream, baby.
and I would probably say the following. I would probably say, in terms of meats, there are these things called regenerative farms that really know how to basically, use, the fertilizer that comes from the animal to help create good soil, and that the animals are eating basically grass and eating what they should be eating, which is good for the animals. So there should be a lot more regenerative farms that are out there. That's healthy for the environment. That's good for the animals. That ends up being good for us. I would like to see basically, we all live in houses, and, some people have got big fences that kind of block them away, and people could sort of kind of live on their own. But, back in the cave, well, I wouldn't say caveman days, but I mean, back a long time ago, people used to live in villages, there was more connection, more social connection with the people next door. So, I mean, I dream of living probably in a plot of land that actually has maybe a small little farm where we can grow some vegetables, and maybe different family members would go, pick the vegetables at different time. We all cook together and we eat as a big organization, because I feel that way of living is, one, very healthy if you got your own little farm, at home, and the two, you add the component of community, you add the components of social bonding, which is very important for our health.
Totally. I love driving by. I mean, even I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and on my like walk with the dogs, I pass by a community garden, and I just think it's so special. So if you're listening and you want to start a community garden, go for it. I don't have a green thumb. I wish I could do it, but I can't. But I love that idea too. I was actually thinking about a similar concept for food deserts, because I visited Israel 3 years ago at this point, and a lot of those communities, there's like a lot of kibbutzes is what they're called. It's basically like little communities like that where everybody has a job. My mom lived on one when she was in her early 20s, I think, for like 6 months, and she had to peel potatoes, but then she was picking potatoes, but then she got too bad of sunburn, so they put her inside and she peeled potatoes. And so I mean, I think that's a really cool concept for a lot of people to think about.
Yeah, I mean, if we're thinking of access, I mean, people who are probably in poorer areas, creating some kind of community agriculture is a way to potentially bring some jobs into that area, and also then give the access for good quality food as well.
Thank you. Thanks for all those comments. So we love that your website literally says you are your best medicine. So anti-aging medicine, regenerative medicine, I feel like those are starting to become very popular terms kind of tossed around. And for somebody who's looking to find a provider, or for a doctor kind of in this space, how can someone know if that person is credible and like really knows what it is that they're talking? Are there like trigger signs or warning signs that maybe you shouldn't, just because for people listening, they might want to, see a physician like you, but might not live in LA. So what are some things that they can look for in a physician or provider?
Well, great question. And, one, having some additional credentials probably helps the best. There are, a few that are out there. So there is something called the International Functional Medicine. So IFM, if you go to ifm.org, you can find, a functional medicine doctor that it gets trained in this integrative new way of kind of approaching medicine. And then there's another one, which I got trained in, is the American Anti-Aging Society. So it's called A4M. A4M.com or ifm.org. If you go to their websites, you can see that the people that have gone through their training, and they basically have training sessions where they'll do an oral exam and a written exam, and at least they'll pass that barrier. Past that, I still think it's very important that that you see testimonials of patients that have gone through them as well. So I think do your due diligence if they've gotten, the additional, the training, and then certainly see if you can look through their patient, book and testimonials to see if they're actually legit.
And there's also so many natural and healthy ways, like Sav had mentioned in the last question about all these anti-aging medicines and regenerative medicines. How do you look at that from a holistic approach too, if you don't have, if you don't want to do the medicine or it's too expensive?
Absolutely. So I would probably say this, if people were to pick up a copy of my book right now, everything is stuff that you could do on your own, do for free, completely natural. And I would probably say for most people, if you follow that, you're going to be able to get to your thrive state for free. And you put yourself in the best, state so that your labs are going to end up looking good. Now, for those people that don't mind using the aid of modern medicine to kind of boost where they're at, to see maybe, hey, is there toxins going around in their body or a chronic infection that might be there? Is there potentially a food allergy that is kind of lingering that's making you not feel very good? Or, or do you have some micronutrients that are missing in your body? At that point, if you've done all these things that are natural, I'm pretty confident that most people just do the natural things that are in that book, you'll be fine. But if you're still finding that you're not performing as well as you should, or for some people like, what, I kind of want to get to that next level, then you could try to find a doctor like myself. But most people in the anti-aging and regenerative medicine world, unfortunately, none of that is covered by insurance. A lot of that is cash pay. But I want people to know that the majority, and I'll say this right now, the majority of anti-aging medicine is stuff that you can do. You are your best medicine. So you don't necessarily have to pay for a doctor to get to that next level. You are your best doctor.
You are your best option. Absolutely. And how empowering is that to hear over and over? We all have to hear it over and over again. We forget that you have the power to be your own advocate. Absolutely. So what kind of tips would you give to someone who is really new to this health journey and just trying to figure out where to start? I mean, obviously, buying your book, reading your book is going to be like shameless promotion. Hey, buy his book. But yeah, so what other options do people have to really kickstart that and feel like they can?
Yeah. So when you buy the book at thrivestatebook.com,
thrivestatebook.com.
thrivestatebook.com. When you buy the book, you'll one, know what the Thrive State's all about. And then two, you'll be acquainted with those 7 areas, like I said, that are going to make up the Thrive State. So at that point, you can do an assessment, where am I in sleep, in my nutrition, in working out, in my sense of purpose, where do I spend my thoughts? So you do a little inventory there. Then you might be overwhelmed if you have tons of things that you need to implement in your life, but don't be. Recognize that there are going to be a lot of things that you see in the book that you can implement, but all you need to do, step number 1 is if you go through that list, you go, what is the easiest thing for me to do? What is going to be so easy? I could do this in my sleep. I could pick it up, no problem. Implement that thing first. When you do that one thing, all right, in implementing a new change into your body, you're going to shift the energy. If you get rid of a bad habit, or if you insert a good habit, you're going to start to shift that energy, because all those things are energetically tied together. You're going to shift the energy in your body. You're going to shift the way your cells respond to that energy. And you're going to start to feel good about yourself, and you'll have the energy to do the next thing. So you find the next thing on that list that's easiest to do, and then you implement that. You turn that into a habit. Longevity, performance, having optimal health, it's all a habit. Who you get to be, who you show up as in the world, that's a habit as well. So it's all about just installing new habits and letting those habits create a new you.
Absolutely. Yeah. What, in your opinion, what do you think would be the most difficult for people to change in their lives?
Oh, it's so different for everybody. Without getting too deep, we all have sort of different traumas growing up, and we have different ways of dealing with stress that is in our body. One of the ways that are easiest for people to deal with stress is food, which is why food is something that is very acceptable. I feel bored, food. Oh, I feel stressed, food. And that same type of stress drives a lot of different type of behaviors. So I think that's a little bit different for everybody. Everyone's going to have a slightly is going to be more resistant towards changing certain things than not. So and as many clients as I've worked with, I wouldn't say that there is there are things that are easier than others. I would probably say this, that working on your thought and mindset, if you haven't ever explored the fact that sometimes your thoughts are not your thoughts, they're just sort of stuff that you picked up when you were a kid, and not to believe that, and working on that mental and emotional things tend to be a little harder, which is why I say for most people, work on the physical aspects, which is sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Those tend to be a little bit easier because you don't have to think and work through some of those things as much.
Yes, very cool. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions that keep popping up as you talk, which is really awesome. But I feel like I'm like taking over this conversation. But so you must feel like a therapist at so many points too with your clients, right? I mean, and imagine there's like a big portion of this that is mental health and
absolutely,
yeah, walking them through things. So how do you do you kind of feel like a therapist sometimes, or
well, yeah, I think so. And that's one of the things. I think if you don't get into their mind, if you don't get into their heart, it's going to be hard to get them to subscribe to a certain behavioral change for you. And I think that's the one thing as doctors we never really got trained to do. And it wasn't until I did a lot of personal development, got a lot of my own health coaches and coaches in different areas of my life, that I was able to apply these things to get people to actually take real change, to make real change, because people know what they need to do. Right. In terms of, in general, they sort of know what the healthy food is. They know sleeping a little better is going to help. They sort of intuitively know. But why don't people do it? Is it because they don't think things will change? If they are they not in touch with their why? And that's one of the things when I work with people. One of the first things I do is like, what is your why? What is the thing that drives you? And usually it's not the what necessarily sometimes, but the who. Do you have children? Do you have parents that you want to live for, that you want to show up for your very best? So that getting them, to be in touch with that. Why do they want the new version of themselves? And getting in, getting them, to feel this next version of themselves. And then using that vision of themselves to then say, okay, these are the habits that you need to take to get yourself there. And always reminding them when they fall off track, which people are bound to do, but that's another way. Hey, remember you said you wanted to do this for your daughter, that you wanted to walk down the aisle, oh yeah, you're right. So I think a lot of it is mental, and to recognize, okay, you're in the state, that you're in, maybe at a suboptimal health. It's because you picked up habits along the way of doing something. And you really need to shake off those habits. And in order to do so, again, you have to get leverage on people, and leveraging to the people that they really, really care about, or their organization or their mission in life is something that, I have to kind of help coach them do through during the process.
Yeah, I think that out of all of the education and training that I've done, I've found that the mindset aspect and is just so challenging. And my first thesis was on neuroplasticity. And I mean, it's 100% possible, but it is honestly exhausting sometimes to consistently be mindful. I would say that's something I've found really challenging. So I know which one of the 7 would be the hardest for me. But as far as the energy aspect of the Thrive state, how do you see that change with your patients when they start to, work on these other aspects of those 7 and starting to see and experience that energy increase to better, their mindset, their mental health?
Yeah, no, this is something that I'm really happy I kind of come up with, because it really allows me a diagnostic tool, because I can be like, okay, where are you in your sleep? Where are you in your nutrition? And I could see, if they were to just focus on each one of these things will start to shift. And one of the things I love the most is people to go, oh my God, I wake up and I've got energy. Or, my partner says I'm so much better in bed. Or, my children say, I'm in this state where I'm happy to be with them. So it's the most gratifying thing, seeing this energetic change, because again, those 7 things, sleep, nutrition, movement, that's the physical aspect. Then we've got our stress and emotions, that's the emotional aspect. Then we got our thought and mindset, which is the mental aspect. Then we have relationships and purpose, which are the spiritual aspects. All these things are energetically connected. And if you start to work on one of them, you're going to start to feel changes in some of these other ones as well. So that's why, like I said, start with the one that's easiest for you. And then you'll start to see that your whole body is going to start to change. And when you start to feel that change, it's going to create a lot of energetic momentum for you to want to continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how realistic you are about it too, because people create these goals that are just so high and unattainable, because I think that they see these people that are like maybe doing great. We don't really know with social media. It could be anything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then they create these unattainable goals. But I love that you keep emphasizing start small, pick one, and the rest will follow, because you'll set yourself up to fail if you don't. And you got to forgive yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think we're going to move into our weekly challenge now. We would love, Dr. Vuu, if you could announce that for us. I know you said you had something crawling on the top of your head, so not to put you on the spot, but whenever you are ready.
All right. So the weekly challenge for this week is something I called, I just made that up. Which is HUH, which stands for how you happy. So how you happy? So how do you happy? So pick something, and then these next 7 days, something silly, something ridiculous that you wouldn't normally do that will put a smile to your face. We sometimes get into, this mode where we feel like we're in the grind and everything's routine, but do something different. I mean, is it, placing, maybe hanging out with a friend and having a conversation with like a spoon, like between your lip and your nose or something like that. Or maybe it's meeting a stranger and asking them a really strange question that you wouldn't normally ask, but do something a little bit off, do something that's going to bring a smile to your face. Because here's the thing, when you could smile, it doesn't matter if you actually mean to smile or not. You start to activate these muscles. Every time these muscles go up, or you bite on a pen and those muscles go up, your brain is going to start to release dopamine. You're going to start to feel different. And if you can start to do these things, if you could start to inject a little bit of play in every day of your life, you'll start to notice a decrease in stress and increase in the way you feel. And if you start shifting the way you feel, wow, well, then you're going to shift your ability to want to do different things. You're going to think differently. If you feel different, you're going to think different. If you think different, you're going to start feeling different. Remember, all these energies are interconnected. So the challenge for you is, which is how you happy. Demonstrate, I don't know, go on social media and demonstrate to somebody one simple thing that's going to put a smile to your face, and do that thing and share that.
I love that.
it.
That's our best challenge yet. I'm gonna always tell myself, I love it.
It's great because it affects someone else too, because if it puts a smile,
absolutely,
it's probably gonna put a smile on someone else's. So love it, all about it.
Love it. Sharing the energies, right? So, well, Dr. Vuu, we've loved chatting with you today. It's seriously been an honor. We've learned so much from you. I know our viewers and listeners are just going to be ecstatic to learn all of this and hopefully grab that book and really dive a little bit deeper in it. So thank you again. You've truly inspired us. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. It was super, super fun.
Yes, you can find Dr. Vuu on Instagram and TikTok at Kien Vuu MD. So that is KIENVUUMD. We'll put those in the show notes, of course, and be sure to tag him in this show and all of our posts. To become a part of our family and community, join us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. We're on everything at And a Diet Soda. So thanks again, Dr. Vuu, and we'll see all of you next week.
Thanks for listening. We hope you were able to give yourself a little love today. You deserve it.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and check us out on social media for weekly conversations and attainable challenges for your health.